Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose. Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back again, as usual, on the Investigative Journal. Greg Anthony here. This show, you know something, it's going to be a treat today because I'm going to hook up with Rome, Italy, and talk to my old friend Leo Zagami, who's on the line patiently waiting. And boy, we have a lot to talk about. Scandals in the Vatican that we don't hear about here in America, but there's been some here in America that I know Leo wants to comment about. And that's with a Bishop or Cardinal McCarrick, and people calling for Pope Francis to resign. And I think this story goes a little bit deeper than what we hear here in America. And Leo's going to tell us all about it, as well as comment on all the pedophilia claims that are coming out of Pennsylvania. But let me say this so you know who Leo is. He's a long-time advocate of cleaning up the Vatican and the New World Order, and also stopping globalism. I've started talking to Leo well over a decade ago, and many of the things that he has brought out have really come true over the years, and not to mention the Vatican connection to radical Islam, which we've spent a lot of hours talking about. But today, Leo, how are you, by the way?
On my side, and I'm glad to be back on your show, as usual.
Yeah, okay, Leo, let's start out with the Vatican, okay, and what's going on with Pope Francis. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we've been discussing for many years the Vatican, me and you. I mean, we started in 2006 exposing certain things that are now coming to fruition and manifesting in front of everybody, because they were the truth right from the start. I mean, this big pedophilia rings, giant conspiracy made of pedophile lobby that is really controlling in many ways the Vatican is becoming more and more evident. I think that now Pope Francis has two choices here. One is to actually resign, as many have asked, especially in the American church. There is a lot of voices of dissent, or continue, but in this case I think that is really risking a schism in a way unprecedented. So I heard your shows in the last few weeks, Greg, and I always think you are right on many things, but probably your view that this is another scandal of the many we have seen in the past, there I don't agree, because I think here we are in front of something that could actually touch the fundaments and really create that schism that was avoided many times. Okay, we had the schism with Lefebvre. You can maybe remind our listeners also of who was Lefebvre in his positions regarding the Second Vatican Council. But we haven't had really anything major since then. Don't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. Go ahead.
So, as I said, I think this is historically much more relevant because we have, behind closed doors, a conflict between various factions for the governance of this new world order, and of course, the predominant one was more visible for many years. Is the one that we have George Soros, we have Rothschild, we had, of course, the late Rockefeller, and this faction, of course, is a faction that wanted to place Hillary in power, and instead suddenly had Donald J. Trump appearing, and in a way messing up their plans. Now, Some people might agree here, some others might not, but since Trump has been in power, there has been much more done against the pedophile rings inside the church and also in other environments. We also have seen the many scandals connected to Hollywood, for example, than ever before. So you might not necessarily agree with this policy, but you have to admit that things are actually happening. While before, people like Obama were in bed completely with the church and had even Hillary. These are people who have been really sucking on the thumb of Georgetown for a long time without, giving up ever their Jesuit position. They have been loyal to that position, and of course also the Bush family, when they were guiding the Republican Party, it was the same thing. So here it's not really about taking sides with one part or the other, because as we always said back in the days when we started, George W. Bush was the president. Back then we were very critical of him because he was completely connected with the whole Vatican structure. And during this time frame, the 80s, the 90s with Bush father, then we had the whole Clinton era. Nothing changed really in the U.S. Church. Now, the accusations of Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano and a growing number of prominent U.S. figures of the Church are really unprecedented, because they are really also kind of defending those remains of Catholicism that are just remains after the Second Vatican Council, because the Second Vatican Council already opened up to this universal religion that we're going towards, this one world religion they want to control from the Vatican. And the Second Vatican Council encouraged this approach, embraced the Jews, embraced Freemasonry in a way that was unprecedented within the Vatican walls. In fact, we can already remember what happened with the election of Pope Roncalli. Then we had also the blackmail of Pope Montini by the Freemasons who knew about his gay lover. And so there was a corruption of the church that hasn't really started with Pope Francis. We know that, Greg.
Oh, of course, yes, I agree totally. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Leo, was, we may not agree on all the details, but we all know, and you agree with this, that they're setting up a one-world government and a one-world religion. Doesn't necessarily have to be Catholicism. Now, you wrote something called The Last Pope. So what's your thoughts about that? If Francis resigns, what happens?
Well, you see, as I said, if he resigns, he becomes a bit the scapegoat of a whole thing gone wrong, of course. So they can start from scratch here, keeping the U.S. Church from breaking from the mother church. Because here we're facing a schism. A schism means that you pick up a bunch, if, for example, all the U.S. cardinals, archbishops, bishops are criticizing the way Pope Francis is not really addressing this thing, because, yes, he's addressing it with words, but we have to address this problem with facts. We have one thing that was clear from your broadcast in the last few weeks, when you were asked what you were thinking about this whole thing, and you said, okay, for me it's just one of the many things that has happened in the Catholic Church, and now they will once again rise back, like a phoenix back from the ashes once the whole fuss is kind of off the media attention. But here is different. I mean, here there is a conflict internal to the church. It's not a conflict between the church and the media, or the church and the U.S. government or the U.S. presidency. This is a conflict that, first of all, as you know, has been very strong internally to the church from the moment Vigano triggered the first Vatican scandal 7 or 8 years ago. So it's like since then things have gradually first pushed Ratzinger out of the picture, and we know that that was a conspiracy to empower the Jesuits completely and to finally go towards the one-world religion in a way that is unprecedented before. And now they have also the problems that go with the papacy, those problems that were never really resolved in Pope John Paul II's time, where Ratzinger was actually the head of the Congregation for the Matters of Faith, as we know, so he was really in charge of the faith at one point, you know? And you had the age of Ratzinger, and still things were kind of... we saw what happened with the victims of pedophilia just before Ratzinger resigned. With SNAP, with all the many pedophiles that were involved in, they were defending themselves inside the church in one way or another, because Pope Ratzinger was a guy who was, of course, covering up things in the old-fashioned way, where you just move people around. But in the age of the internet, of course, now these kind of things can't be done anymore. The church has to stand still and answer for these sins, terrible sins that they have committed. And of course, Ratzinger was responsible, and that's why he was blackmailed to go away. But then, of course, Pope Francis hasn't done anything better. That's why Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò here is also discussing in a recent interview that he gave to the Italian Rai. So this is the most recent words of this Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò, which triggered this whole crisis in the last week with his statement. Most of all because Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò used to be the Nuncio Apostolic in Washington, so also the senior diplomatic figure of the Vatican in Washington. But the words that Viganò has said are very interesting. Greg and I would like you also to discuss them with me, because he is saying what happened to this case that was given in Castel Gandolfo from Ratzinger to Pope Francis. It was a case full of documentation, a documentation that, of course, was regarding all the scandals of the Vatican. And he, Viganò, invites the journalists to ask what has happened on this case. And at the same time, is firm in his position of criticism towards this Pope that has done nothing but giving disinformation all the way, covering up and doing the same thing that at the end of the day was doing Ratzinger before him. I mean, if the Jesuits managed to blackmail Ratzinger out of the picture because he was not fulfilling the expectation of a clean church, definitely Pope Francis has done nothing to get things better. Of course, maybe he has managed in some way to fix things at the Vatican Bank, at the York, but he has not managed yet to fix completely the situation regarding the pedophile scandals, which keep on erupting because they are symptomatic of a church which fundamentally is satanic. Padre Amort, you remember Father Amort?
Yes, go ahead.
Father Amort, the great exorcist, has been inspirational for people like the creator of The Exorcist, who dedicated, I think, the last documentary ever done of Father Amort. Very, very scary documentary that you can see on Netflix. Father Amort was the exorcist of the Vatican, the number one exorcist, and he himself, around 2000, I think it was 2010, he said, there is the devil in the Vatican. I mean, Satan is now in the Vatican. I mean, the exorcist, number one exorcist of the Vatican, of the Diocese of Rome, the guy who used to teach exorcism, people came from all over the world to do basically years of study with Father Amort on how to take out demons out of people. Well, we have a situation whereby he, in his last books also, he wrote a couple of books also that I remember came out approximately 6 and 5 years ago. And these books always were saying the same thing. I mean, there is cardinals, there is Satan in the Vatican. There is cardinals who dedicate themselves to Satanism. I mean, he even said that. I mean, and I think that's a very strong thing, for a figure like Father Amor to state. So, what do you expect from a church that has at the top of the hierarchy a bunch of Satanists? I mean, then we have, of course, the grand jury report. The grand jury report, and the grand jury report has brought out in the open, as you have noticed yourself. I have read many of the 1,400 pages of this report, and I invite you to do the same, because it's a very interesting piece for us who dedicate ourselves to journalism. Reading this report, there was elements that are satanic in nature. So
let me get this straight. So this exorcist actually is going into the Vatican trying to exorcise these demons out, right?
Well, Father Amort, he exorcised demons out of people. He never said he could exorcise demons out of the Vatican, because he said that there were cardinals involved in Satanism. So that's what was happening inside the Vatican, in an increasingly open way. A figure like Father Amort, who, as I said, was involved in this also recent documentary by the film director of The Exorcist. Father Amort denounced the Vatican because they were satanic in nature. So his own church, he was denouncing his own church. He wasn't denouncing something external. He knew that Freemasonry had infiltrated the Vatican, and that, of course, there was also Satanists in the Vatican. There was people that were not really Catholics. They were pretending to be Catholics, and at the same time, evil was spreading in a wider way every day. So now we have this whole accusation, these accusations that are coming out every day. There is many. This grand jury report is full of perversions of all kinds from this priest. And there is going to be many other probably investigations that are triggered from this grand jury report in Pennsylvania, all over the U.S. And as you know, this Greg will bring the U.S. Church to complete bankruptcy.
Yeah. And there's a call here for Francis to resign. What's the thoughts in Rome with the people there and insiders in the Vatican?
Well, I mean, there was his usual Wednesday meeting out in the open where he does his mass on a Wednesday, for a public, comes there in St. Peter's Square. And at one point they started to shout, "Vigano, Vigano, Vigano." I mean, out of the crowd came this big voice of people, a chorus of people, "Vigano, Vigano." Then 1 hour later, the Vatican media said no, they were shouting "Italo, Italo." I wrote an article about it, and I also put a link to the video where you can actually clearly hear this chorus from the crowd shouting "Vigano, Vigano." Of course, you can always have a listen yourself. Greg, I know that you had some experience with Italian, so I invite you to go and check this video, because if it is Vigano, it's pretty impressive. I mean, this will be the first time that a Pope is contested in St. Peter's Square for the last few hundred years.
Yeah, exactly. If they're saying get out, right?
Well, they say Vigano, which is basically the Archbishop who has denounced and has asked for the resignation of Pope Francis. Now,
right.
We know that the majority of U.S. bishops, as I said, U.S. clergy, archbishops, very important figures. We have figures of the Catholic Church, like the Bishop of Phoenix, who said that Vigano is a trustworthy person. We have the Bishop of Tyler, Texas, Joseph Strickland, who actually gave the permission in his Sunday celebration to his priest to read declarations made by Vigano. This is quite credible. The only one who has defended the Pope is the Archbishop of Chicago, Cardinal Place, Jay Kubich. He said, "Oh, no, it's inappropriate. It's more important the environment and protecting immigrants for the Pope." I mean, okay, the environment is important. Okay, the immigrants might be important to some people. Of course, as I said, the Pope seems to actually be making money out of it. So all this migration is actually, filtered through his Catholic organizations who are making a lot of cash out of it. So it's not like a free interest he has on this question, this situation. But I think that Pope Francis now, defended only by one cardinal in the US, who has immediately been attacked by everybody after this interview that he gave on Chicago NBC 5. Channel 5 NBC in Chicago gave this interview with this cardinal, and then he went back on it, retracting the whole thing, saying that the report created a false impression that my comment should not go down the rabbit hole for the allegations of legal newsletter. I mean, this is like we have a situation in the US with the church in crisis. We have, as I said, out of many voices, only one supporting Pope Francis. This technically means that the US church is in for a schism. Don't you think so? Okay?
Go ahead. What was that, Leo? I had a little interruption here. Go ahead.
No, I was saying that this means that the US church might be close to a schism.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what do you think? Do you think that the Catholic Church could break away from Rome in America?
I mean, this could be highly possible. You have to understand one thing, that the money never went from Rome to America. The money always goes from America to Rome. Okay? So all the dioceses that are there working on how to pay these pedophilia cases, they will never get any money from Rome, because all the money that was ever produced in U.S. church, part went to Rome and part they kept. But there was never any money given from Rome to the U.S. church. So, you understand what I'm saying here?
Yeah, go ahead.
So basically this means that the U.S. church can't expect the Pope to give them money. So when you don't, the Pope is saying the wrong things. He can't help you out because he can't give you any money. You are in a situation where basically you're going bankrupt. You change company. it's right. I mean, if you see it this way, I mean, if you want to see it in a managerial way, it's basically, this is the way things are going. At the same time, of course, the church is promoting the interest of the Democratic Party, and there is a bunch of nuns who have decided now that they're going to go around the U.S. to protest Donald Trump's tax cuts. Outside the Mar-a-Lago resort, they went ahead of a crucial vote, and now the group will be visiting 21 states and targeting Republicans left, right, and center. And it's a bunch of nuns. Now, nuns shouldn't really open their mouth, because recently they have been involved in the worst scandals possible. In the UK, nuns in Scotland have been recently arrested. Even an old 93-year-old has been investigated. They were getting kids to eat their own vomit, practice homosexual acts, and also at the same time they were in front of them and also doing satanic rituals. This was actually written by the press in Scotland. And this was an order, a very powerful order in Great Britain of nuns. And like them, and then there is a whole crisis, I don't know if you remember, I don't know if we discussed this in the past, regarding this thing that is coming up recently with all these nuns worldwide who were saying they've been abused by priests.
Right. Hey, Leo, hold that thought, will you? Because I have to take a break right now. And we're going to come back. And I got a story, too, that just broke here in America about a place called St. Joseph's Orphanage in Burlington, Vermont.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah.
I had the story with the nuns that forced other kids to see getting killed. I don't know. It's a terrible story.
I got to break away. We'll talk about that in the second half hour. I'm with Leo Zagami, back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, we're back from the break. I'm with Leo Zagami from Rome. And, Leo, we were talking at the break about we're at a turning point in history. Tell the listeners what you mean by that.
A turning point in history because we have been discussing for many years this internal crisis of the Vatican without really seeing anything really manifesting in the outside world. Now there is an involvement of the government, of the grand jury, in a report of 1,400 pages that is unprecedented, and at the same time, I tell you, this is not something that they can bury under the sand or they can just forget about in 1 year from now. This is a much wider scandal that involves the whole of the Catholic Church and of the Catholic hierarchy right at the top. If Pope Ratzinger was removed because of his failures, Pope Francis has just as much failures, if not more, because he knew about it. I mean, he arrived in the Vatican in 2003 with a whole case of evidence given then personally from Ratzinger to him, and this case was never used, because then those people not only stayed in power, some of them were actually promoted, and Cardinal McCarrick became a sort of advisor of Pope Francis for the US Church. Now, can you have a pedophile as an advisor? I mean, and of course you will say, well, they might get this Pope to resign, and that's it. Well, the thing is here, of course he has to resign, because otherwise he is risking a schism. A huge schism is risking a schism, meaning that there will be a breakup of the church, like we have seen sometimes in the history, no? We have even seen two popes at once in history, if you go back hundreds of years, no?
Right.
I mean, you have to, of course, go and study the history of the Vatican to get this kind of critical moments in history. But usually, these schisms in the past were pushed more by an outside force wanting to redefine their own church. Like, for example, in the case of the Anglican Church, no? There was a king. He managed to make his church independent because he wanted to divorce, he wanted to do things that were not accepted by the mother church in Rome. Now it's an internal crisis that sees a strong criticism from people like Cardinal Burke, for example, Raymond Burke, who was heavily criticized because he also was part of this dubia, these cardinals that came together to shape this document against the Amor Laetitia, who was this document of change issued by Pope Francis. Here we are talking really about a crisis that is to do with the fundamentals of the Catholic faith, because Pope Francis wants to destroy this faith. He wants to open up to all sorts of things that are unheard of in the past in the Catholic Church. So we already had, of course, people like Lefebvre, very critical of the Catholic Church, but now we have strong criticism by all those people who still actually see Hugh Ratzinger as being much better than Pope Francis. Even if Ratzinger had his failures, at least he was keeping the rigidity of his faith together.
Right. I always wanted to ask you this, but, Francis is a Jesuit. Have there been many Jesuit critics of Pope Francis?
No, you see, Pope Francis has only allies in the Jesuit because he kind of embraced what is the philosophy that is pushing the Jesuitry to destroy the religion, the Catholic faith. They want to go towards a one-world religion, but they have to destroy first their own religion. Otherwise, how can you get something new going on? Destroy those dogmas, destroy those certainties that, of course, the Pope is now opening up to the gays, but that is not something that can be, necessarily bad. But he's opening up on one side to the gays, and on the other he's criticizing them. On his way back from Ireland, he said, if you have a gay son, send him to the psychiatrist. So, he's also contradictory at times in his own policies, because with Father James Martin, who is this prominent Jesuit who published, he's the head of Americana. I don't know if you know this Jesuit publication in the US. Father James Martin was even given the podium on the Thursday of last week, 1 week ago, in Ireland, during the World Meeting of Families, and he's the prominent advocate of the LGBT movement, the conciliation with the Catholic Church. So,
Well, you've done a lot of stories in the past about Pope Benedict being gay. What about Pope Francis?
I never really discovered much about the sexuality of Pope Francis during his pontificate. While Pope Ratzinger left a lot more trails behind, and in the end he was possibly blackmailed because he was found, like we said in the past, in a night with young seminarian, and he was forced to push the emergency button of the satellite that connects with the Vatican, and they have to pick him up in his fancy BMW, and he was with this young seminarian in the middle of the night. That was so. While we had also the closeness that Father Georg had with Ratzinger. Father Georg, this very handsome priest, who is still working very closely between Ratzinger and Pope Francis. I don't know if you know this figure, Father Georg.
No, I don't.
He's the young lover at the time. Now he's, of course, much older. He was the young lover of Ratzinger. And he is still a close confidant of Ratzinger. So, I mean, Ratzinger left behind a lot more traces of somebody who is, of course, part of the gay lobby, or at least he is homosexual, he has some homosexual activity. With this Pope, we don't really know much. We heard that he's straight, we heard that he doesn't indulge in much action. I think his only drug, if I have to tell you the truth, is power, like for most Jesuits.
Right. You know, you mentioned he may go back to Argentina, but do we ever talk about the crimes he was involved with in Argentina anymore?
Well, that's why he wants to eliminate out of the political picture his major critic, which is Cristina Kirchner, the ex-president, Cristina Fernandez Kirchner, the ex-president of Argentina, who was very critical towards Pope Francis, even when he was still an archbishop or cardinal. He was, of course, still not the Pope, but he was already criticized as being a devil. And Cristina Kirchner was pretty confident that Pope Francis was a devil in 2006.
Yeah.
So she was really ahead of her. Of course, she was living in Argentina, knew very closely the activities of Pope Francis. Pope Francis, you see, he has a past. In the early 70s, he was still, very much a right-wing fascist. Then he went through that scandal with those two, when he was head of the Jesuits, with that big scandal regarding that they brought out with that book that came out in Argentina called The Island of Silence, of that journalist called Berbinsky, I think is his name. And the scandal regarding these two Jesuits who were basically arrested by the dictatorship of Argentina at the time, and Pope Francis knew about it. And actually there is documentation in the book about Pope Francis actually signing documents where he perfectly knew that these people, will be arrested soon. And they ended up being for 6 months living in the worst conditions, the two Jesuits, because they were 6 months, they were blindfolded for 6 months, imagine. And when they took the blindfold off after 6 months, and they let them go, only one of them stayed in the Jesuit order, and they both, of course, were highly critical of Pope Francis. Then Pope Francis kind of spent a lot of time, as you know, in Germany, spent a lot of time abroad, basically, and during this time, he became a communist. Full-on communist. I mean, you can call it left-wing, you can call it liberal, you can call it whatever you want, but he became the Pope Francis we see today. At that point, he went back to Argentina, and then at that point he was embraced by all the liberal, by all the theology of liberation freaks that he had been criticized only a few years before. So this is really the history of Pope Francis just a resume of who is Pope Francis.
Leo, tell us how the Italian newspapers are treating this now. What are you hearing from all the different sides of the Italian newspapers?
Well, as I said, there was this situation of tensions in Italy regarding these migrants on this ship. And this has been one of the prominent things on the newspapers, also regarding the fact that Pope Francis intervened himself through the CEI, which is the Episcopal Conference, as you know, of Italy, and they forced Italy to accept these 100 immigrants. So that is the big thing. Then there is, of course, his resignation. Everybody wants him to resign. Of course everybody wants him to resign. Though we know already that the future Pope is not going to... the future Pope is going to probably be from Nigeria or from some other country in Africa, because he represents the immigrants who are flooding the whole of Italy, Europe.
How has Rome changed with all these immigrants coming in?
It's changing the worst. It's a dirty city, very dirty, very dangerous, and with continuous acts of violence and rape. Women being raped by Nigerians, by Ghana, by people from other parts of Africa every single day. It's insane. It's like they're raped. Some of them are also mugged. They are even assassinated, like it happened in the past in Macerata. And some of them are even been eaten, because these Nigerians, especially the Nigerians, they are part of these secret societies that practice cannibalism and voodoo rituals. And they are spreading all over Italy. These Nigerian secret societies are like the Nigerian mafia. They are the Nigerian mafia. They're very dangerous. And the Pope is basically protecting them. And he does it, I tell you how. The heads of these Nigerian mafia organizations have been basically made knights of one of his orders inside the Vatican. Knights, you ever heard of the Knights of San Sylvester Pope?
I don't know too much about them. I've heard the name.
The Knights of San Sylvester Pope, it's Order of San Sylvester, is a pontifical equestrian order, a bit like, for example, you have, it's close, but similar to maybe, I don't know, the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre or the Knights of Malta, but it's even more exclusive, okay? Because it's of knighthood awarded directly by the Pope. And a lot of Nigerians, a lot of Africans, especially at the head societies that are ruling the criminal militia, they have been, especially in the last few years. And this I know from internal sources.
Hey, I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about Turkey. We know a lot about what happened at the coup with Erdogan, but also it's fallen on deaf ears here that Erdogan wants Fethullah Gulen returned, and then he will release an American hostage. But the internal politics of America are not allowing Gulen to return. Tell us a little bit about what you know about Fethullah Gulen and who he really is.
Fethullah Gulen is an asset of the democratic side of the CIA. For that reason, he will never be returned to Turkey, because he knows state secrets in the US that, especially after the Soviet Union was kind of falling apart, right in the period in which the Soviet Union was falling apart, Fethullah Gulen was considered a very important asset by the US. And his organization gradually infiltrated darkest countries like Turkmenistan and other countries of the ex-Soviet Union. So the US has always had a relation with Gulen's schools, especially because Gulen has this organization made up of a lot of schools that, of course, promote his ideology, but are also regarded as very, very good schools, most of them. And basically, they were used as a cover-up operation, the prophet and all the rest, by the CIA. This is actually was made official even a few years back by the ex-head of the Turkish intelligence. So I think that it's very difficult for them to give them back Gulen. Though I would, because I think Gulen deserves a bullet in the head. But I mean, I'm probably,
Well, you ran into his organization in Norway years ago, and he's basically a radical Islamist, right?
Not only that, let's remember this, that Gulen was one of the few Islamists to ever be received by John Paul II in the Vatican. So, I mean, there is a direct connection between the Vatican and Fethullah Gulen. Thomas Michel, we exposed over 10 years ago on our show, after I met him in Oslo, and was working with the Gulen movement, and even made an introduction for one of Gulen's books, where Gulen was openly talking of the New World Order, and where Gulen himself threatened anybody who didn't accept the New World Order with retaliation. I mean, he actually said that in the book, it's written. And the book is introduced by Thomas Michel. I actually have an autographed copy with the dedication.
And Thomas Michel's a Jesuit.
He was the head of he was, up until only, I think, 5 years ago, he was the head of the interreligious affairs of the Jesuit order. And now, instead, he moved to Turkey. He moved to the city, I think, of Izmir. And he was directly involved with the coup. So, there is a direct connection between Fethullah Gulen and the Jesuits. So Fethullah Gulen will never be sent back to Turkey. Of course, Erdogan is trying to play his cards. He's trying to, find solutions. He's trying to find ways of escaping this crisis by also asking a closer alliance with Russia and with the countries that are opposing at the moment the US. Also in the Middle East now there is a lot of tension. Here in Europe at the moment nobody's talking about it. Greg, maybe we are the first to give this news today. In the US news I didn't see anything about it, but there is the biggest exercise of Russian ships to date in the Mediterranean Sea. And it's not apparently an exercise, but it's a way of laying down the foundations for a future operation that touches Syria, to finally free Syria out of the Al-Qaeda, CIA, Jesuit base. Because we have to also say that Padre De Loio is still there in Syria, conducting terrorist operations with terrorists, Muslim terrorists. He's never been found. You remember Padre De Loio, Father De Loio?
Right, yes. Yeah.
He's still there. And of course, in Syria there is now something happening because they want to try to really free the whole of Syria by the old Obama-era CIA terrorist organizations.
Yeah, and Father Del Olio, he was the direct Jesuit connection to ISIS, right?
Yeah, and also Al-Qaeda. And apparently he's still involved with this whole thing. He's not dead. Nobody ever said that Father Eloy was dead. They always said he's dead. And I heard a witness who was arrested was for a time in prison by ISIS, who said there was apparently with them a Catholic priest.
Mm-hmm.
Who was, and this was a bit unusual, no? To have somebody involved so closely with a terrorist organization, and of course that could only be a Jesuit, because we know how the Jesuits operate. They have always operated very closely to terrorist organizations worldwide. It's like a tradition of the Jesuits, if you think about it. Okay? No?
Exactly.
So, now I think that we have the Pope was to decide. Either he resigns or either there's going to be a schism. At the same time, you have the crisis of the migrants, which is erupting all over Europe. Now today, if you tune into the internet search engines and put German riots, you're going to get a whole bunch of results, because there is riots going on in Germany, just as there is riots going on here in Italy, in Rocca di Papa, to oppose the decision of the Pope to elect in these immigrants, because they've been sent in a Catholic center belonging to the Pope, no? And so the Pope said, I'm going to spread them to the whole of Italy. But many people don't know that Rocca di Papa is, near Rocca di Papa, there is also all the zona, all the area where the satanic masses take place there. There is actually an area there near Nemi. You remember the Lake of Nemi?
Yeah, I do.
It's a very beautiful place. But around Nemi, the whole area there is satanic masses taking place. Various. There is even a book that came out a few years back, Satan's at the door of at the gates of Rome. That explains all the various many satanic rituals that were found, that were investigated, the people involved, the crimes, and the thing is that there is a link also. I heard about it between this guy who has this Catholic center, where he welcomed the immigrants, and Satan. So there is a direct link.
Hey, hold that thought, Leo. We'll get you on another show and we'll pick up there. But tell us, we got about a minute left. Tell people where they can get your books and your website.
Well, of course, you can get all the information you want on my articles on leozagami.com. You can get my books on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And the publishing company also that has published 5 of my books in the US. The latest one is coming out actually soon. I want to send you a copy. I want later, after they finish the show, I want to give you your address so I can send you a copy. And it's called Invisible Master, and that's CCC Publishing, that also has their own website and sells directly also the book. So, I mean, there is various ways of getting my books. There is also an Amazon Volume 5, which is published by my wife's publishing company, Cursum Perficio, and we are working also on a new book also for that publishing company. And thank you very much for having me on your show, Greg.
Yeah, we've got about 30 seconds here. Leo, thanks for coming on, and I'll have to get to Italy and we'll have a plate of spaghetti again, okay?
Absolutely. We hope that when you come in Italy, better than the one we're having now, because Italy now is refusing to pay 20 billion to the EU. There is a lot of conflict. There is even the possibility that this populist government is going to be kicked out before you even arrive here because
all right,
Soros.
Leo, got to cut you off. Got to go. Talk to you again. Thanks for being on the show.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.